Good afternoon. We are here for another Mediumship literature group. We meet each other Monday at 5 p.m. Pacific time. Everybody's welcome to join us to our live discussions. If you would like to join us, just contact me through my Facebook page, Revenant, or my website, revenant.world, and I'll be happy to add you. It's free of charge, and everybody's welcome. We are reading the Spirit's Book by Allan Kardec, and we are reading in sequence from the beginning to end. We have finished the Gospel According with Spiritism, and we are now reading the Book of Spirit. We are going to start where we left last time on chapter 7, the return to the spirit life, question 149. Who would like to start reading for us?
I can give it a go.
Thank you.
Return from the corporeal to the spirit life. Number 1, the soul after death, its individuality, eternal life, separation of soul and body. 3, temporarily confused state of the soul after death. The soul after death. 149. What becomes of the soul at the moment of death? It becomes again a spirit, that is to say, it returns to the world of spirits, which it had quitted for a short time. 150. Does the soul after death preserve its individuality? Yes, it never loses its individuality. What would the soul be if it did not preserve it? How does the soul preserve the consciousness of its individuality, since it no longer has its material body? It still has a fluid peculiar to itself, which it draws from the atmosphere of its planet, which represents the appearance of its last incarnation, its spirit. Does the soul take nothing of this life away with it? Nothing but the remembrance of that life and the desire to go to a better world. This remembrance is full of sweetness or of bitterness according to the use it has made of the earthly life it has quitted. The more advanced is the degree of its purification, the more clearly does it perceive the futility of all that is left behind it upon the earth. 151. What is to be thought of the opinion that the soul after death returns to the universal whole? Does not the mass of spirit considered in its totality constitute a whole? Does it not constitute a world? When you are in an assembly, you form an integral part of that assembly, yet you retain your individuality. 152. What proof can we have of the individuality of the soul after death? Is not this proof furnished by the communications which you obtain? Is it not? Sorry. If you were not blind, you would see. If you were not deaf, you would hear. For you are often spoken to by a voice which reveals to you the existence of being exterior to yourself. Those who think that the soul returns after death into the universal whole are in error if they imagine that it loses its individuality. Like a drop of water that falls into the ocean, they are right if they mean by the universal whole the totality of incorporeal beings, of which each soul or spirit is an element. If souls were blended together into a mass, they would possess only the qualities common to the totality of the mass. There would be nothing to distinguish them from one another, and they would have no special intellectual or moral qualities of their own. But the communications we obtain from spirits give abundant evidence of the possession by each spirit of the consciousness of the theme, and of a distinct will, personal to itself. The infinite diversity of characteristic of all kinds presented by them is at once the consequence and the evidence of their distinctive personal individuality. If, after that, there were nothing but what is called the great whole, absorbing all individualities, this whole would be uniform in its characteristics. And in that case, all the communications received from the indivisible world would be identical. But as among the denizens of that other world, we meet with some who are good and some who are bad, some who are learned and some who are ignorant, some who are happy and some who are unhappy. And as that they are individualities, different individualities, perfectly distinct from one another. This individuality becomes still more evident when they are able to prove their identity by unmistakable tokens, by personal details relating to their terrestrial life, and susceptible of being verified. And it cannot be a matter of doubt when they manifest themselves to our sight under the form of apparitions. The individuality of the soul has been taught theoretically as an article of faith. Spiritism renders it patent and as an evident and, so to say, a material fact. 153. In what sense should we understand eternal life? It is the life of the spirit that is eternal. That of the body is transitory and fleeting. When the body dies, the soul re-enters the eternal life. Would it not be more correct to apply the term eternal life to the life of the purified spirits? Of those who, having attained to the degree of relative perfection, have no longer to undergo the discipline of suffering. The life of that degree might rather be termed eternal happiness, but this is a question of words. You may call things as you please, provided you are agreed amongst yourselves as to your meaning. Separation of soul and body. 154. Is the separation of the soul from the body a painful process? No, the body often suffers more during life than at the moment of death, when the soul is usually unconscious of what is occurring to the body. The sensations experienced at the moment of death are often a source of enjoyment for the spirit, who recognizes them as putting an end to the term of his exile. In cases of natural death, where dissolution occurs as a consequence of the exhaustion of the bodily organs through age, man passes out of life without perceiving that he is doing so. It is like the flame of a lamp that goes out for want of ailment. 155. How is the separation of soul and body affected? The bonds which retained the soul being broken, it disengages itself from the body. Is this separation effected instantaneously and by means of an abrupt transition? Is there any distinctly marked line of demarcation between life and death? No. The soul disengages itself gradually. It does not escape at once from the body, like a bird whose cage is suddenly opened. The two states touch and run into each other, and the spirit extricates himself, little by little, from his fleshly bonds, which are loosed but not broken. During life, a spirit is held to the body by his semi-material envelope, or perispirit. Death is the destruction of the body only, but not of the second envelope, which separates itself from the body when the play of organic life ceases in the latter. Observation shows us that the separation of the perispirit from the body is not suddenly completed at the moment of death, but it is only effected gradually and more or less slowly in different individuals. In some cases, it is effected so quickly that the perispirit is entirely separated from the body within a few hours of the death of the latter. But in other cases, and especially in the case of those whose life has been grossly material and sensual, this deliverance is much less rapid and sometimes persistence of vitality in the body, nor any possibility of its return to life, but is simply the result of a certain affinity between the body and the spirit, which affinity is always more or less tenacious in proportions to the preponderance of materiality in the affections of the spirit during his earthly life. It is, in fact, only rational to suppose that the more closely a spirit has identified himself with the matter, the greater will be his difficulty in separating himself from his material body. While on the contrary, intellectual and moral activity and habitual elevation of thought effect a commencement of this separation even during the life of the body. And therefore, when death occurs, the separation is almost instantaneous. The study of a great number of individuals after their death has shown that affinity, which in some cases continues to exist between the soul and the body, is sometimes extremely painful for it causes the spirit to perceive all the horror and decomposition of the latter. This experience is exceptional and peculiar to certain kinds of life and to certain kinds of death. It sometimes occurs in the case of those who have committed suicide. Can the definitive separation of the soul and body take place before the complete cessation of organic life? Sometimes happens that the soul has quitted the body before the last agony comes on, so that the latter is only the closing act of merely organic life. The dying man has no longer any consciousness of himself, and nevertheless there still remains in him a faint breathing of vitality. The body is a machine that is kept in movement by the heart, and continues to live as long as the heart causes the blood to circulate in the veins, and has no need of the soul to do that. Est-ce que tu pourrais arrêter avec ton crayon, s'il te plaît? Merci. Juste arrêter avec ton crayon, s'il te plaît. Merci. 157. Does the soul sometimes at the moment of death experience an aspiration or an ecstasy that gives it a foreglimpse of the world into which it is about to return? The soul often feels the loosening of the bonds that attach it to the body and does its utmost to hasten and complete the work of separation. Already partially freed from matter, it beholds the future unrolled before it and enjoys in anticipation the spirit state upon which it is about to re-enter. 158. Do the transformations of the caterpillar, which first of all crawls upon the ground and then shuts itself up in chrysalis in seeming death, to be reborn therefore into a new and brilliant existence, give us anything like a true idea of the relation between our terrestrial life, the tomb, and our new existence beyond the latter? An idea on a very small scale. The image is good, but nevertheless, it would not do to accept it literally, as you so often do in regard to such image. What sensation is experienced by the soul at the moment when it recovers its consciousness in the world of spirits? That depends on circumstances. He who has done evil from the love of evil is overwhelmed with shame for his wrongdoing. With the righteous, it is very different. His soul seems to be eased of a heavy load, for it does not dread the most searching glance. 160. Does the spirit find himself at once in company with those whom he knew upon the earth and who died before him? Yes, and more or less promptly, according to the degree of his affection for them and of theirs for him. They often come to meet him on his return to the spirit world and help to free him from the bonds of matter. Others whom he formerly knew, but whom he had lost sight of during his sojourn on earth, also come to meet him. He sees those who are in erraticity and he goes to visit those who are still incarnated. 161. In cases of violent or accidental death, when the organs have not been weakened by age or by sickness, does the separation of the soul take place simultaneously with the cessation of organic life? It does so usually, and at any rate, the interval between them in all such cases is very brief. 162. After decapitation, for instance, does a man retain consciousness for a longer or shorter time? He frequently does so for a few minutes, until the organic life of the body is completely extinct. But on the other hand, the fear of death often causes a man to lose consciousness before the moment of execution. The questions here proposed refers simply to the consciousness which the victim may have of himself as a man, through the intermediary of his bodily organs, and not as a spirit. If he have not lost his consciousness before execution, he may retain it for a few moments afterwards, but the persistence of consciousness can only be very short duration and must necessarily cease with the cessation of organic life to the brain, of the brain. The cessation of the human consciousness, however, by no means implies the complete separation of the perispirit from the body. On the contrary, in all cases in which death has resulted from violence and not from a gradual extinction of the vital forces, the bonds which unite the body to the perispirit are more tenacious, and the separation is effected more slowly. Shall I stop here?
Any questions or comments so far? So far we are talking about the experiences of the soul during the different kinds of death, right? Which is really interesting. What you guys have understood so far?
Well, it's interesting that maybe in your lifetime that if you have higher thoughts, or it just could be real quick when it's your time, versus if someone takes their own life, that might, is that what, I can't, I'm not sure if I remember that right, or which one was it, the violent death, where you might hang on to your body a little bit longer? It might be taking a little longer.
Yeah, we in both, like when someone takes their own lives, and when there's a violent death or sudden death, is like all abrupt, right? It's abrupt and causes shock, causes distress to the mind, right? When one is unconscious right before death. So the person that usually takes their own lives is in pain, right? They are in pain for a while, and their relationship with life is usually not pleasant, because of many reasons. And then that in itself lowers the frequency of the spirit and the mind. So that's exactly what you're saying. So that's why you get attached longer to the body, because it's not, the spirit is not in a good frequency to enjoy the spiritual world, because of what happened before. And also, if the person had a low frequency existence, so per se they mention someone that is has pleasure doing wrong, right, doing bad stuff for other people, has lower frequencies of existing in general throughout their lives, they also experience like not pleasant transition, right? Because their spirit is not in a good vibration. So even if they others felt that they are winning, so like for example sociopaths, they feel no shame on killing other people or doing wrong or committing crimes. They feel no regret or remorse, but their spirits know, right? That's what is very interesting about what we are learning right now. When they go to the spiritual world, that's when the real consciousness come to again, and they feel shameful of what they have done, and they feel pain because what they have cultivated in their hearts is not in higher vibration. They are detached from God, detached from their higher selves. So therefore their experience there is not pleasant, is painful, until they look for help, until they kind of engage in their own healing in the spiritual world, receiving the help that's always available here and hereafter. So all those things that they are describing and what they are described afterwards, what happened with the life, with the spirits after that, nothing is terminal. And that's the beauty of, the revelations of the spirits in Spiritism. There's not such a thing as life, hell and heaven forever, for eternity. The same way that we can change here, that we can improve our lives here, we can heal here from whatever diseases, mental or physical, we can also heal on the spiritual world and through the different reincarnations as well. Sometimes the healing on the spiritual world is not like automatic, or is not fast, because if the spirit is not developed enough, they need several incarnations to learn and to understand and to gain consciousness. And as they progress, as they grow, this kind of relationship with the spiritual world, with life in general, what is the meaning of life and what they're supposed to do as spirits becomes more clear, and their boundaries and their consciousness about what they need to do with their lives when they are here is much clear. And so it becomes easier and easier, this kind of transition from life and death, and also less painful, until we don't need to come back anymore to this reality, this dimension. So, all right, any other comments or questions?
I think it kind of makes sense with what we know from, general culture, or like what we've heard in general, that traumatic deaths tend to result sometimes in people feeling stuck a little bit longer.
Mm-hmm.
Or like, somebody who's going through something very violent, like an accident, kind of having an NDE, but still being attached perispirit wise.
Mm-hmm.
Or like, when people kind of astral project and kind of can, do so around like the surrounding areas of the body, but have a hard time going further.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So that's what happened with that first spirit on first kind of documented, right, case, where in the beginning of modern spiritualism, of the Fox family, right? Everybody's familiar with it.
No.
So the Fox family, that was the beginning of this modern spiritualism in America. So there was this house, which is now a center of the spiritualism in America. I forgot the name of the place, somethingville. I forgot the name. So there was a house that was haunted in upstate New York, and everybody that moved there would live there for a very short time and leave it, and move to another house because they could not handle the level of activities that there was in that house. So then this Fox family moved as well, and they had some daughters. They have two daughters, and they experienced the same things: a lot of activities, knocking and noise and light switching and all sorts of things in the house. And so the parents started to investigate. So maybe there's squirrels between the walls, maybe there's some animals, rats. They start to investigate and nothing. They called neighbors to help and nothing. And then the girls, the sisters, started to ask questions. So is there a person there? Is there a spirit? Is there a spirit of someone that lived in this house that's making those noises? And little by little, they started to develop communication style methods with the spirit. So if yes, knock one. If it's no, knock two. So they start to develop methods of communication until things progress, and they did this day after day. They gathered a lot of information about this spirit, and ended up that this spirit was a man who was killed, was murdered in the house, and the parts of his body was chopped in parts and was stored in different places of the house. And he said exactly where it was. And then the people, the father of the Fox family and the neighbors were there and did some digging, and they found it. They found his body. So that's when everything started. So they started to gather, like people, practicing mediumship and spiritualism, and other people came from other cities, and all this science behind, like why, like how can this is possible? So there's obviously an intelligent being on the other side, and this communication with the spiritual world is possible. So all scientists and other mediums started to gather and stuff like that, and that was the beginning of modern spiritualism. So like you said, the guy and he wanted to tell his story. He wants justice for his dad, so he was not a bad person. So the haunted house, people associate with bad spirits, right? But no, he just wants to have this message across, and he wants justice for what have been done for him and his family. His family managed to run away, but he was killed. So, and then they investigated the information that he got, and the murderer was caught as well. So was a legit story, and so all came from spirit. So and that's why he was attached to the house until he got his message across. He didn't stop. So it's a beautiful thing that they have personalities.
And
right?
How long could this potentially go on? Centuries?
What?
Let's say that it hasn't been resolved yet.
Yeah, it could go on for centuries. Yeah, absolutely, because spirits have no consciousness of time, especially if they are attached to the material world. They don't have consciousness of time. So I lived in a house in Massachusetts, in Newton. The first house in Newton we moved was built in 1800s, and we had manifestations there. We had spirits there, and then the information we got, my daughter used to see them, and I used to feel them. And information we got, we went to the library, and there was indeed an old lady and a little girl who lived in that house and died in that house. So there was public information about that. So so 1800.
Yeah, I had an experience too in a very old house of a friend of mine I was staying in, and apparently it was like in the family. It had been passed on and on from generations. And I stayed in the lady's house in the pink bedroom. I slept there, and my clock was moved. and it was angled like the face of it being out of the room, and other people, and I would put it away, but later it did, I had to have it out again for alarm, and same thing, it was turned, and it was like face down, and even my watch was, the face was kind of like tried to turn it over, but it wasn't completely, and it was at this strange little angle, and it was really interesting. But people have said that they've even seen clocks kind of like even explode in the room. She just does not like, maybe it's the reminder that time is passing, I don't know. But
And that's part of her
yeah.
knowledge. But at that time, you were not a medium yet, right, Elizabeth?
Right, yeah, that was long.
So bad, because now you could understand. So what's your deal with the clock? What you want to tell us?
Yeah, 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 I know.
Yeah.
I wish I could have, yeah.
That's interesting. So any other questions or comments?
That's good.
Perhaps we could try to finish. There's just a little bit more. State of soul after that. $163.
Okay, I can read it.
Thank you.
Temporarily confused state of the soul after death. 163. Does the soul, on quitting the body, find itself at once in possession of its self-consciousness? Not at once. It is for a time in a state of confusion which obscures all its perceptions. 164. Do all spirits experience in the same degree and for the same length of time the confusion which follows the separation of the soul from the body? No, this depends entirely on their degree of elevation. He who has already accomplished a certain amount of purification recovers his consciousness almost immediately, because he had already freed himself from the thraldom of materiality during his bodily life. Whereas the carnally minded man, he whose conscience is not clear, retains the impression of matter for a much longer time. 165. Does the knowledge of Spiritism exercise any influence on the duration of this state of confusion? It exercises a very considerable influence on that duration, because it enables the spirit to understand beforehand the new situation in which it is about to find itself. But the practice of rectitude during the earthly life and a clear conscience are the conditions which conduce most powerfully to shorten it. At the moment of death, everything appears confused. The soul takes some time to recover its self-consciousness, for it is as though stunned and in a state similar to that of a man waking out of a deep sleep and trying to understand his own situation. It gradually regains clearness of thought and the memory of the past in proportion to the weakening of the influence of the material envelope from which it has just freed itself, and the clearing away of the sort of fog that obscured its consciousness. The duration of the state of confusion that follows death varies greatly in different cases. It may be only a few hours, and it may be of several months or even years. Those with whom it lasts the least are they who, during the earthly life, have identified themselves most clearly with their future state, because they are soonest able to understand their pew situation. This state of confusion assumes special aspects according to the characterial peculiarities, and also according to different modes of death. In all cases of violent or sudden death by suicide, by capital punishment, accident, apoplexy, etc., the spirit is surprised, astounded, does not believe himself to be dead. he obstinately persists in asserting the contrary, and nevertheless, he sees the body he has quitted as something apart from himself. He knows that body to be his own, and he cannot make out how it should be separated from him. He goes about among the persons with whom he is united by the ties of affection, speaks to them, cannot conceive why they do not hear him. This sort of illusion lasts until the entire separation of the perispirit from the earthly body. For it is only when this is accomplished that the spirit begins to understand his situation and becomes aware that he no longer forms part of the world of human beings. Death having come upon him by surprise, the spirit is stunned by the suddenness of the change that has taken place in him. For him, death is still synonymous with destruction, annihilation, and he thinks, hears, it seems to him that he cannot be dead. And this illusion is still further strengthened by seeing himself with a body similar in form to the one he had quitted, for he does not at first perceive its ethereal nature, but supposes it to be solid and compact like the other. And when his attention has been called to this point, he is astonished at finding that it is not palpable. This phenomena is analogous to that which occurs in the case of somnambulists who, when thrown for the first time into the magnetic sleep, cannot believe that they are not awake. Sleep, according to their idea of it, is synonymous with suspicion of the perceptive faculties, and as they think freely and see, they appear to themselves not to be as asleep. Some spirits present this peculiarity even in cases where death has not supervened unexpectedly, but it more frequently occurs in the case of those who, although they may have been ill, had no expectation of death. The curious spectacle is then presented of a spirit attending his own funeral as though it were that of someone else, and speaking of it as of something which in no way concerns him until the moment when at length he comprehends the true state of the case. In the mental confusion which follows death, there is nothing painful for him who has lived an upright life. He is calm, and his perceptions are those of a peaceful awakening out of sleep. But for him whose conscience is not clean, it is full of anxiety and anguish that become more and more poignant in proportion as he recovers consciousness. In cases of collective death, in which many persons have perished together in the same catastrophe, it has been observed that they do not always see one another immediately afterwards. In the state of confusion which follows death, each spirit goes his own way or concerns himself only with those in whom he takes an interest.
Very interesting, right? What did you guys understand of that?
How it's different. I didn't really know that there was a confusion state.
Mm-hmm.
But it makes sense, especially in a brutal or catastrophe or
Yeah, it's a huge change, right? It's a huge change from our reality here in this dimension to the spiritual world. So the same way we don't remember everything about our lives in other dimensions as a spirit or in other incarnations, like completely, because we cannot manage to have all this information. It's too overwhelming. The same way they kind of need to adjust, right, to their consciousness to the other side. Because everything we get used to it, right? Imagine someone who lost their vision and then they lived for decades without seeing, without sight. And then they were granted with a surgery, with some kind of a transplant, or, and they regained their vision. They have the eyes perfectly working, but they need to learn how to see again, because the relationship between the eyes and the brain, and the consciousness of it is something that needs to be built. So it's the same way with our transition to the spiritual world. We need to get some time to learn again, to make that adjustment in our consciousness, our spirits, because the consciousness, what we call cerebral, or brain awareness or something, has nothing to do with the physical. This is all spirit. Our body is just, a machine, a way for our spirit to live and to connect with the spiritual world, or with the material world, to manifest and to experience the material world. But what really gives life is the spirit. The body can be functioning, and when it comes to like the beginning of life, there's no such a thing as a body without a spirit. Before the body is completely formed, there's already a spirit waiting for it, right on birth. When it comes to the transition from the material world to the spirit, back to the spiritual world, it requires a transition again to adjust, right, to the spirit, to adapt to the new reality. Anything else that you guys would like to comment or?
Yeah, well, I think the whole confusion state is pretty much what the movie Ghost is all about.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah, some spirits don't realize they are dead for the longest time. They think they are alive, and they get, really angry because people don't see them, don't listen to them, and they cannot do what they used to do. It all depends on which kind of transition they had, and also the level of their development as a spirit itself. And also there are spirits who continue to be attached to the material world, not necessarily to their body, for many centuries, but that's what is called the obsessors. They have cravings for certain food. They want to experience the same physical pleasures that they had as incarnated, when they were incarnated. So they have desires for sex, they have desire for drinking or using certain drugs or smoking, and then they use whoever is incarnated and is in the same frequency. They use them to experience their pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
It's really freaky, but that it happens.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Now say that again. So the obsessor uses someone who's alive right now on our material to taste something or to experience sex.
Yeah.
Huh.
So it's kind
And
of like that.
make someone addicted, or
Mm-hmm.
could make you kind of like start being an alcoholic or something, just so they can.
Yeah,
Oh.
like we all have free will, right? We all have free will.
Mhm.
Nobody's gonna influence anybody. Even the most demonic spirit can have this power to influence us if we don't open a little gap. And this little gap can be just a very stressful period of time, can be sickness, can be mental illness, can be anything that we become, or can be like our own spiritual desire to do the same thing. If our spirit is in the same level, also it can happen. But then in this case, there's no conflict. The person just feels good doing that, and they feel no shame, no guilt on doing wrong things. And then the other spirits gather. There's a book think I have recommended to you guys. There's a book called, gosh, I always, something about sex, Sex and Destiny. It's called Sex and Destiny by Chico Xavier, and the whole book is automatic writing. So is that a spirit from the other dimension, person from the spiritual world, describing what he sees on those families from the spiritual perspective. So, and there's a case, there's all different characters, that different families and different characters in each family, and each one of them has their own thing. And there's one guy who, he was a normal guy, like when you say, like, we know many of those people nowadays, like that guy. So he has his job, he worked all day, but every day he would come back home and smokes his cigarettes and binge drinking. And then the spirit describes all the collective amount of negative spirits that were gathering around him. And that, and that guy had a lot of depression, a lot of, problems, emotional problems, because of all these negative spirits that were, and he was creating that to himself because of his attachment to devices. So he was opening the portal for those who want to binge drinking with him and smoke and do all that kind of stuff that he thought he was doing for himself, but no, he was also, attracting all those negative spirits who were also addicts. And
how do the negative spirits that then want to come in and drink through this person, how do they find him? How do they?
It's frequency. It's like, when we talk about the law of attraction, that's what it means. Everything we do and feel, there's a vibration involved. There's an energetic vibration that we create with everything we do. When things are negative, when we are sick, or when we are sad, when we are angry, when we do things that are not healthy for ourselves, all is negative frequency. And there are other spirits that are vibrating in the same frequency. And they are craving for it. They are desperate because they don't have their own body. So they are aggressive, looking for everywhere.
And then, so where are this person's guides or angels that are supposedly?
Yeah, but I mean, the guides and angels respect our free will. They respect our free will. That's the main thing about what the spirits teach us. Even in the Bible is said, and all the books from spirits say that we have free will, and based on what we choose, that's the consequences that we are gathering both here and hereafter. And of course, we continue to have free will for whole eternity, and as we do different choices, we have different results, right? Nothing is set in stone, and we are all going to reach a level of perfection, spiritually speaking, where only happiness and peace is going to prevail. However, in the meantime, the speed of this development depends on us in our choices. So in this book also, the spirit was revealing, like, there are some people questioning that, like, let's go and help him. And then the spirits, the enlightened spirit said, we cannot mix with the darkness. If that person opens up a space, if they ask for help, we are going, but until then we cannot do anything.
Can I add real quick to that? Susan, so from my understanding of it, and this just personal interpretation, I don't know if you guys ever heard of the levels of consciousness by Hawkins. So it's kind of like, I don't know if I'm allowed to share here, but there's kind of like, am I allowed to share my screen?
Not
Oh no, I'm not allowed. Okay, so so you can Google it real quick. It's just like levels of consciousness. So basically, like this this theory associates certain emotions with certain vibrations or certain levels of consciousness, right? And so the further down you are, the more close you are to shame, guilt, apathy, grief, fear, and stuff. So from my understanding of it, it's that further down we are on the road, the harder it is for our guides to get to us. And so the more guidance we need at that moment, but the less we are able to receive it. So it's not just about free will. I think there's like kind of a spiraling down effect where the person just isn't even aware that they're in their free will. They're just feeling like they're being tracked down, and they're being like kind of held down, but they don't realize how they partake, their responsibility in it. And I think that the further down we are down the road, the more susceptible we are to interference from lower vibrational entities. And further up we are, the more we are able to receive guidance from
That's interesting because
spirits.
there's that kind of goes along with so many of the so Janet No Havoc, I used to take classes with Janet. Janet would say that there is no such thing as ghosts. That she said that it's energy, negative energy, or a memory of an energy that was there that would replay and replay and replay. But she did not believe in anything negative. But she was also a nun, and very so maybe where she was in her level, that just wasn't even in her rep. Do you know what I'm saying? Like that she was at that higher level of consciousness since the beginning, before she even got into mediumship, being a nun, and her whole history of religion and only believing in that. I don't know.
Well, I don't think that there's like bad spirits. It's just that it's like they're lacking some form of involvement, development, right? It's just that they're kind of stuck into some lower vibrational
Like what they were,
and,
like what they probably were when they were here.
yeah.
Exactly. So, but it's the same as we have here. So let's look around us in our world, right? I think we all have learned or heard or of cases of people who are sociopaths, right? There's documentaries on Netflix, on TV, on everywhere, and we have heard and newspapers stories since the beginning of times. There are people who are, if you watch some documentaries about serial killers, they have pleasure on doing wrong and doing bad for other people. They are not just they are underdeveloped because they don't have consciousness of what they are doing to themselves, and they are doing bad for others, but they are attached to that pleasure of doing bad. So it's not that they are just, so the sickness is the attachment with bad. So they can harm. Yes, they can harm. The same way we have bad people here, sociopaths and serial killers and sexual offenders and all sorts of people that are that has personality disorders, what we call personality disorders. There's the same thing as in the spiritual world, because people don't transition to the spiritual world and automatically become angels. No, it's a process of evolution from one incarnation to another, until we learn little by little, and then until we gain a level of consciousness that's more elevated. But the thing about, Susan, what you said, when we are in a lower, I'm saying we, like in general, right? When we are in a lower level of existence, I'm not saying a transition or a period of time, because all of us are subject to go through crisis, right? When we are going through crisis, we vibrate in a lower level, but it's not permanent, because our spirits, if our spirits have learned things, we have acquired a level of consciousness, it's not that we are going backwards, it's temporary. But when we are in a permanent level, like in an evolutionary level of low vibration, we don't see, the spirits don't see more than their level. They cannot understand anything but what the level of their existence. But the spirits that's more elevated, the spirits that have developed enough, they see everything else. They are able to understand, they are able to see and perceive everything else, their level and the lower levels. So that what there is that sometimes a person is very well developed, like in mediumship, and they have a wonderful heart, and they have a wonderful a lot of things to teach and to offer, and they are wonderful people. There's like higher vibrations and everything, but this doesn't necessarily go along, not necessarily, I'm not saying this absolutely thinking about anyone, but I'm just saying in general, this doesn't necessarily come along with the knowledge of the spiritual world. That's why I like to have those classes. And also for myself, I like to learn, I like to read a lot, I like to study, because practicing mediumship is not necessarily learning about the spiritual world. You know, we can learn a lot through the direct connection with spirits. Yes, spirits can teach us, but we need to learn and study and have the relationship with the spiritualism as a science, because otherwise we can say stuff that is not really true. And what's the best knowledge? The best knowledge comes straight from the enlightened spirits, the literature that already existed, already exists, the scientists, the produce of scientists that have studied spiritualism and this whole reality of spiritual world in the past, and also the ones that are still studying today, but studying scientifically, right? So there's a difference again between practicing in circles and even like graduating in some schools and studying in a deeper level of the science of spiritualism. So yes, so what we see, and like when we see other realities of different groups who works with spiritualism, who works with spiritual healing through mediumship. In Brazil, there's a lot of centers and groups who work, there's a huge emphasis on healing the spirits that is on the other side, working with the obsessors. And because of that, there was a lot of information that was gathered about their nature, about the reality of those obsessors. And knowing those realities, we cannot deny there are negative spirits. Yes, there are bad spirits. But the thing is, nevertheless, they are not that, like this forever. There is always a hope. There is always, they are like all of us have the same chance of evolving and developing. How long that's going to take, that's if it's longer or shorter time, depends on us. In our choices, what we do with our lives, our opportunities in each incarnation. Because when we are incarnated, that is the time where we can evolve. When we are in the spiritual world, we can have help, we can receive healing, we can become a little aware. But here, when we are incarnated, that is the time where we can grow. It's the same thing as learning theoretically. When we are in the spiritual world, we learn theoretically. We learn the theory of what is right, what is wrong, what we need to do, what we don't need to do. But the practice, the internship, or the, how can I call, the practicum, or the residency of a doctor, let's say, right? When the doctor is in the medical school, the practice, when you're going to put in practice, is when we are incarnated. So, but when someone is it always resisted, always lived their whole lives in that kind of vibration of having pleasure, to inflict pain on others, to take advantage of others, of making others suffer, and making things that are clearly wrong, killing and doing vicious crimes and this and that, that person is not gonna heal all of a sudden, or but there's always hope. We can always teach. That's why this kind of stuff we are sharing with them as well. As we are talking about them, they are here to listen. What they are going to do with that is their choice. If they are going to take or not, is their choice. But we make that knowledge available for them as well. The ones that are confused, the ones that are lost without hope, because the ones that are bad are the ones that has no hope. They suffer, they have pain, they are in agonizing pain emotionally, but they don't see any hope for themselves. So they're only, since there's no way out, they find pleasure on making everybody else miserable. And that's the logics behind it. So as they experience love, that's why love is healing. As they experience love, they experience kindness, and everything that's related to a higher level of being. Little by little, that's what breaks them. That's what makes them open a little bit of door and see. If they start to believe in themselves, start to believe there's hope for themselves, that they are not necessarily put in their reality of pain and suffering forever, for eternity. If they can become happy and healed, then they start to loosen up a little bit. They ask for help. They start to try to get better and to learn and to develop themselves. And that in that regard, yes, they are not bad in the essence. They are not bad forever. No one is bad forever. Everybody has hope, and everybody will develop at some point. Definitely. We are all coming from the same point of very low level, and we are all going through a very high level of vibration as well as we develop. How long that takes depends on our choices. Okay, so let's do our final prayer. Sure. Elizabeth?
Could I ask a quick question before the prayer? Yeah. So if I do a prayer protection, but do a meditation, and then I drift off to sleep with it, even though, and I guess I'm in my subconscious. Is that safe? I mean, could possibly, if there are such obsessing spirits or whatever, would that not be a safe time to do that, for me to do it like that? Or is it best to only practice doing my meditation during the day when I'm still like not completely asleep?
So what do you mean, like sleep with a prayer of protection on your ears? And
Well, at night, I'll say the prayer of protection, and then I'll listen to a meditation, and then I'll drift off a lot of times, and every night. And then I thought, well, since these spirits are, here, should maybe that be a little too vulnerable? Would I be a little too vulnerable or
No, I
something?
don't think. I think
Or is that okay?
if you did the prayer of protection, and if the meditation doesn't set your mind, because the
No,
meditation
it's
can be
very nice. Yeah.
good. If the meditation puts your mind at ease and in a state of mind that's positive, there's no danger on that. And the fact that you did a prayer of protection before, that's all we need, to remind ourselves that we need help and ask for help, and that's it. Nothing is stronger than God. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. And doesn't matter how vicious they are, they have no chance, because we are closer to God.
Can I just share a story that I just was talking? My cousin's a psychologist also, and he knows this shaman, and he's very spiritual also. And the shaman came to him. They trade services, and this woman was having difficulty. I don't remember specifically, but it turns out he does hypnosis, and under hypnosis, it turns out that she had an entity inside her that they've had like many lives together, like since way back. And their agreement was that he would keep her safe and she would give him power, or he would something like that they had an agreement from before she incarnated. And he was getting mad, this entity inside her, because she was becoming more powerful, more independent, and didn't necessarily need him. And through the hypnosis or something, my cousin was able to, and he doesn't do any of this like past life, like this is not his thing, but
Uh-huh.
that it came out during the
Yeah.
hypnosis.
Yeah.
And he said, well, take a look around. And I don't know, I think that she said that there were angels in the room. And he said, well, see if there's an angel that you feel comfortable with. And the guy did left, and then he came back, and then he left. He left with that angel. It was such an interesting story.
Yeah. See, that's the beauty of spiritualism. It's like, and I don't even want to call spiritualism the spiritual world and reality of us as spirits, because you don't need to believe it. You don't need to be a spiritualist. You don't need to be a medium. It's science. That's the reality. It's the same thing as, what is water, what is air. Like, if you go to different parts of the world and do the same experiment, you're going to see the same components, right, of water and air, like O2 or HO2 or CO2 is the same formula. So it's a reality. So it's beautiful. Yeah. See, that's a case of obsession, because the guy was taking advantage of her, and he didn't like when she developed this.
But it was an agreement that they both had for many lives, through many lives together, which
Yeah,
is so interesting.
yeah, it happens, and that help us to remember that, you know the choices we make has consequences, right? The alliances we make has consequences in our lives and after, hereafter. Is, she had no need. Why they did that agreement in the first place? Because none of them believe in their own power, right? He didn't believe in his own capacity to reach his peace or whatever, and she didn't believe her own capacity to develop her own power. So that's when we get into trouble, when we don't believe in ourselves, in our ability to evolve individually, because we are individuals. We can live in society, we depend on each other, but our reality is individual, and we need to develop individually. Like, our responsibility over what we do or not do is individual, and the results and rewards of the good things we do is also individual. So
May I add something, Elizabeth?
sure.
So, from my understanding, Elizabeth, is that it seems like what you're going through in your mind is a recurrent discussion over the different mediumship groups out there. And one thing that I noticed that seems to come back a lot is that a lot of mediums who have established practice don't necessarily do the protection rituals, or they don't even, like, some don't even really believe in prayers, even though they don't think it's bad, right? But it's just that we're not on a lower vibration, so they don't have access to us. So it's always good to remind ourselves that only love and light can come through, but you don't need those rituals in order to be safe. You're safe already. Your spiritual bouncers are there, your guides are there for you, because you understand, like we understand the higher nature and order of things, and we're kind of vibrating in that area. So if I'm connecting the dots with what I was saying a little bit earlier, is that just as in, let's say you would be seeing people fighting on the internet for something stupid, right? You don't feel the urge to get into that. But that's the same with people who are vibrating on the lower end. And that's the same with spirits, right? So they kind of like get together because that's where they're at, like people who like to fight will always find themselves. So it's a little bit of a similar mentality. So basically all I wanted to say was that you're safe. You're good.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
It's always good to have those little rituals and feel safer, right? But bottom line is, just in general, you're safe, and it's always good to just remind ourselves to be in that higher level of things. But that's it, right?
We just need to also remind ourselves that the fact that we do right, we have like a level of consciousness or this and that, doesn't make us necessarily perfect. We all have, like, for example, when we are sick, when we are stressed, we vibrate in a lower level. We go low, right? It's not because we are bad people necessarily, but as the same way, even when we are vibrating a higher level, we are not perfect. We get angry at someone in the traffic that, almost crash our car or put a finger, show a finger to us or something. We feel angry, and that's a lower level of vibration. It's part of our nature still, but it is nevertheless. So we are not perfect, and remind ourselves. And also, when we want to do good, we also attract bad people that want to take advantage of us. The obsessors love higher vibrational spirits as well, because they cannot stand people being happy. They want any little chance to put those people that are happier or in a higher vibration down. They would love, and they have no measures, like they put all the effort to do that. So it's important to be vigilant. I experience a lot of things in my personal life. Not that I'm consider myself perfect, absolutely not. I have a lot of flaws, but I always being close to God. I'm always trying to grow and to develop myself and to be better and this and that. So, and I have experienced a lot of things, a lot of cases of the obsessor. I work with mental health, and people are sick in different levels. There's all kinds of diseases. And when we are open-hearted, when we feel compassion, when we feel, empathy for those people who are suffering, even those who have a bad nature, I always look them as sick people, and I want to help them as much as possible. But nevertheless, we become vulnerable. We become vulnerable, and then there are some cases where they some spirits have created problems for my life because they cannot stand it. They cannot.
How do you identify? How do you identify? How do you know that it's a spirit that, you know what I mean? Like, how did you know that it was a spirit that was creating issue?
From different ways. Like, for example, I was not like that before I met them, and I was like that after I met them, and also through messages from other mediums who had no idea who I was, about my life, about what happened, about the people that I encountered. They came and say things that really matched what I was experiencing, and they even developed, they revealed even further information that's like, whoa, was worse than I thought.
Wow.
So yeah, we have to be vigilant. So that's why I always emphasize, it's not that we need to be paranoid, absolutely not. But when we are open-hearted, when we want to help people, we are vulnerable as well. And when we are, it's the same way as a doctor, right? A doctor can be a very, very healthy person, and they can take care of themselves, not necessarily, but let's say a doctor that's very healthy, right? But they go every single day to the hospital. They meet all sorts of people. If they don't protect themselves, they don't put masks when they do a surgery, or when someone is sick, or they don't wash their hands, when they don't maintain some distance, they can become sick. Yeah. I had a friend who was a gynecologist, and he like was doing a delivery at OBGYN, right? So he was doing a delivery and was like an emergency room and stuff, and was like, and the person, like, they were still preparing, putting her in a table, and this, she just arrived, and all of a sudden, like, the balls exploded in his face. The water of the uterus exploded in his face before he was ready, and she was HIV positive.
Oh,
So that's the same thing
Wow.
that can happen to us as mediums or as people. Like, you never know who is on the other side. All right, so let's do our final prayer. And what wonderful group, so we can continue the discussion next time. Dear God, the spirits of the light, our spiritual guides, thank you for this wonderful group. Thank you for the lives of everyone in here. Thank you for this wonderful opportunity to read the wonderful, enlightened information shared to us through your enlightened spirits, through this book, this Spirit's book. Thank you for the life of Allan Kardec, who dedicated his life to document all those important informations that's so useful for all of us through the centuries. Help us to also do our part here now, to be instruments of healing to the world, to do whatever we can in our own capacities, in our own aptitudes, to share informations or to share healing, to share love, and make our planet a better place. Help us to apply those knowledge and those things that we are learning into our daily lives, so we can grow and use the opportunity, the precious opportunity that we have here in this incarnation, to grow as much as we can. Thank you for your unconditional love, compassion, and guide every single day. Thank you very much. Amen. All right, so everybody that's home watching us, you're welcome to join us next time in 2 weeks at 5 p.m. Pacific time. You can contact me through my Facebook page, Revenant, or my website, Revenant the World. You're welcome to be added to our live discussions here in our Mediumship Literature group. Thank you and have a wonderful week.